I'm Jordan from Cadence. I didn't get the intro at the start with a couple different speakers, but we're based out of Edmonton. We're a specialist in open text, Microsoft, and SAP. So we do digital transformation. So on this webinar, I'm the demo guy, usually my role as well. So I'll kind of just cover a few things I'm going to show off in the compliance center side of things. I'll go through the file plan. Cindy had a really good planning and concept there in terms of what's required to be undertaken before you actually move into the technology. I want to cover case closure of records. This is a question we get asked all the time. One of the previous gaps in the 365 ecosystem natively was the inability to close out case records without needing a third-party add-on and that kind of thing. So the example I'll go through is when a contract's completed, we actually want to go and apply a different retention label and start to make that record immutable. I'll go through some sensitivity labels. If you haven't seen sensitivity labels, I think you'll be pretty impressed in terms of its power and how documents can be labeled automatically and classified based on the content inside of the document or record, as well as pattern recognition. So social security numbers, social insurance numbers, patent IDs, anything we want to kind of have the ecosystem of 365 search inside of the content. I'll go through legal holds. I've worked with a lot of other ECM and content services applications, and I'm really impressed with the 365 legal hold capability. And specifically, it's a very wide feature set. It covers everything under 365, which it should, of course. And it also has that ability to go very deep in terms of how content is collected, how you can target a custodian or a user, and going into different areas inside of different applications, Exchange / Outlook, OneDrive, Teams, which everybody's been using the past couple of years. And then I'll show off a little bit about data loss prevention. So we do have about 20 minutes. One question I do want to ask, kind of with a show of hands, so if everybody's moving the mouse now, how many people on the webinar today have attempted something in records management in 365? Set up a file plan, played with any of these features on the screen. If you can just hit that raise hand button, I'd just like to take a look because we always kind of try to gauge the audience there. So we're approaching 10-ish. Excellent. A little less than I thought, but that's good. We're going to learn something today. So, all right, I'm going to jump out of PowerPoint, and I'll jump into the actual demonstration, and we'll go through this shortly here. So I'll just move this over. The picture of the day from Microsoft is a rhino with two birds on it. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to jump in here. We're logged into one of our development tenants here. If you've seen me present before, it's a pretty standard environment for us now as we build out additional functionality. What actually is in this environment is we have a number of different test users, administrators, records managers, and it gives us the ability to actually just go through here in real time and look at different components of the Compliance Center. So conveniently now, Compliance Center is its own app, or at least app link inside of 365. We're going to open that up, and I'll walk through going through one of the file plans here. So if you haven't seen this before, and you're looking at doing the licensing side of things, I actually gave a presentation probably 6 months ago that's available on our website at Cadence on the licensing components required for different levels of access in the Compliance Center. The short summary on that is if you're going to do full-blown records management, you're going to need E5, G5, or G5 if you're government from Microsoft. That gives you full access to the Compliance Center and the ability to go do the things that I'm going to show you here. So there's lots of different areas here. We could probably go through and do a 2-hour webinar on this. Maybe one more show of hands. Is there a lot more interest in seeing the Compliance Center exclusively in a webinar, like a full demonstration, over an hour? Is that too long? If you can just throw your hands up there if you're interested in seeing more of that, just raise your hand so we know how to develop our next webinar. On the records management.
Yeah, quite a bit of people there.
All right, take notes, Jared.
You bet.
I can't see anything right now. I'm sharing. So I'm just going to load up the records management side. The one piece I have seen with 365 and the development side of things is it does run a bit slower than a production instance. So couple lessons in the file plan. So of course you can see any pending dispositions, and the end game of the records is very transparent here. But as you're actually building out your file plan, if you're doing things in a rush or you're going through an implementation, it takes time to publish the actual file plan, and it can take up to 24 hours. So we haven't seen it take a full 24 hours. We've usually been under 24 hours, and one time it took about 4 days, which was quite interesting. But I'm going to go through and create a label, and then we'll publish it. We'll let the system do its thing, and we'll move on to some other features in terms of applying a label and what that looks like. So if we're actually going to go ahead and create a label here, we'll just call it webinar label. We can add a description for users or administrators. So if you do have those scope notes or anything we want to add in, we can. If there's a reference ID, one feature that really impresses me is the citation. So if you want to actually track your citations here, I've worked on records management projects coming up on 12 years, and there's always that spreadsheet with the master linkage to all the citations. If we can do that in here, we should encourage that. We have the different authorities. If we want to choose an authority, we can add those in ourselves as well. So if you want to track the full side of the retention schedule and all the little T's and C's around it, they can be put in here. Categories and business functions. So if you do want to apply the label to a specific business function or add a new business function or department, basically develop that tree, that can be done here as well. So we're going to take the generic road now in the essence of time and just kind of move forward. So this is leaning on a bit of what Cindy mentioned. So are we retaining things for a specific period of time? Are we marking items as record? What's our retention period? Are we basing that on an event? So if we do want to have a retention period, let's say the stereotypical 7 years, we want to retain things for 7 years, and we want to start the retention period based on a field. And the example I'll show in a bit is the output of that on a contract that's closed. So when we actually want to go through here, what do we want to base that on? One of the gaps previously and why those third-party records companies really, made a lot of money the last 10-ish years was their ability to do a function like this. The ability to go grab end of life of an asset, an incident date on something that you're tracking on more of a case function, end of a project or closure. These events are stored in a different area in here, but you define them and then you grab the fields around that. Wrong button. If we want to mark everything as a record, we do want to retain things for a period of time, we can do that. And it really starts to lock down those users, which is really what we want to do most of the time after a certain stage of them working with the documents/records. At the end of the retention period, we're going to pick our end game. Are we deleting items automatically? More than likely, we're going to trigger a disposition review. And we're going to pick a few reviewers along the way. If we're doing nothing, I don't know why we're doing this, but we could retain things for 7 years. Moving forward, if we do have multiple stages, so we've worked a lot with the OpenText system. It does a really good job of stages and reviewers. Microsoft's kind of leveling up to that level now in the record side of things. So we can do, reviews can consist of multiple stages. And as we add those reviewers, we can go through different stages. Typically, it's going through department level approval of a records representative or at least a manager or director level, somebody that's going to give the records folks the ability to do their job and perform that final disposition. So in this department review, we're going to send this over to Lee. Just 1 second to pull up. And Lee's one of our users within, of course, 365 in the Compliance Center as well. We're going to review and finish, create this label. Let this submit briefly. And the general concept as this publishes or as this submits is in 365, as you go through those records areas, anything in the Compliance Center, is a left to right concept in terms of where you're at in configuration as well. So while this is finishing up, we're just going to crack a new tab open and let that do its thing. So on the records management side, in here, you'll see that we've went through the file plan. I'm not going to go through every single piece here. We're going to need a lot more time than the 15 or so minutes I have today. But essentially, once you have your file plans, they need to be published. So once they're published, they will show up as a label policy. When they're showing up as a label policy, we can choose two methods of applying that. We can auto apply a label, meaning if a piece of content or a pattern is inside of the document, we want to automatically apply a retention schedule to that or a label to that content. Or we can manually publish it. Now, as an implementer, we see a lot of the downfall of allowing users to do anything in records. So we use inheritance principles, as well as auto publish or auto applying and auto selection of those by the system, as opposed to a user that doesn't care as much about records as they should. So on the file plan side of things, this webinar label is right now deemed inactive. We're going to go ahead and publish this. And we can walk through the publishing of the label. So we can choose to have this adaptive. So we can select different scopes for this, define users and groups, or we can choose static. And I'm going to choose static for now. And we get to pick the locations we actually specify this to. So to show you as many as possible, we can apply this label, this retention schedule on just email, SharePoint sites, OneDrive accounts, or any combination here of these fields. So if you're just looking at targeting a specific SharePoint site, we're going to do something more like this, and we can either include or exclude specific sites. So if we know something's really sensitive, we're dealing with intellectual property, and it's always stored in this library, in this site, let's just target that label to that site. It also, in my opinion, saves the publishing time from the actual tenant as well. So right now, we're just going to apply this on SharePoint sites. Name the policy, and you'll see everything here, specifically the 1 day for labels to appear to the users. Labels won't appear in Outlook and the web app for mailboxes that have at least 10 megs of data. So if you're using one of those throughput mailboxes, accounts payable, or something that's constantly just churning things in and out, be aware of that setting. We'll submit these labels. I'm going to jump into SharePoint and show the case closure side of this. So in our SharePoint site, just to kind of set the context here, we have a number of different areas in contract management within our procurement site. Contracts are stored by vendor, so we have a number of different vendors. In the Cadence Corporation folder, inside of our library, we have a document set, and the document set is called a contract workspace. So in this area, we're going to create a new contract. We're going to add a couple documents into that contract document set. And then we're going to actually close the contract and see that this retention label on the far right here will actually automatically apply. It takes a couple minutes for it to do it, but it does automatically do that. So go through and just create a contract. If you've seen me demo before, I usually go to contracts. My whole implementation life pre-records was all contract management. We'll pick our vendor. There's lots of opportunity for automation here, not the context of the demonstration and presentation today. We're going to pick our contract type. We'll do a statement of work. We'll just say it runs throughout December. We're currently drafting the contract, and we'll say it's out to Jordan. We'll create this set. Inside of this set right now, we have nothing pertaining to the label itself. So right here, you'll see apply label, and it says choose label. Right now, it's completely empty. Now, if we want, we can have our users select a label. Just for demo purposes, I'm going to select something completely boring so you can see that it switches. We'll just say that this is a, a sales document for now. I'm going to go in and I'm actually going to go upload some documents. it's going to automatically inherit that label as well from the set. So that's a huge win. As long as we make the right call on the set, we can make the right call downstream on the documents without needing to bother the user and potentially have them make a mistake on it. Now, if we want to do something even more interesting, we can actually create templates here, and we can push these placeholders from the document set into these templates for more of an automated contract management solution. Not the context of this, but we will have an upcoming webinar next year on that. So if that is of interest, just put your hand up and we'll make sure we get that on the calendar a little earlier than we were planning. So it's a contract management webinar in terms of automating contracts. We constantly get asked about contracts, accounts payable, and HR onboarding. Those are three scenarios that we get asked a lot to demonstrate and implement. Inside of this Cadence Corp area, if let's say we're done with the webinar contract document set, we can actually go over here. Let's make this a little bigger. And we can actually close this out. So one of our fields here is the status. And our contract status, we're going to set to closed, saying we've done everything else. It's approved. It's closed. What's going to happen behind the scenes, take a few minutes to run, is you're going to see the retention label change from what it's set to, which is our sales document, to statement of work. And that will actually make it immutable and push that down to all the records inside of this document set as well. So same concept, we're going to lock everybody down, we're going to apply the appropriate retention, and we're going to move on from there. So I'm going to jump over to another department here while that runs. You know what? We'll just duplicate the tab so we can jump back. We're going to jump into HR, and I'm going to show off both sensitivity labels and the data loss prevention side of things. So here at Cadence, we have an employee data sheet that's required to be filled out by everybody. So we know if they're who their emergency contact's going to be and everything else. And in that data sheet, there's a bunch of sensitive information. So I'm going to open this data sheet here. We're going to see that we have a social insurance number. So I'm just going to copy this for now. It's a fake one, by the way. For our American friends, it's a social security number. In Canada, it's a social insurance number. We do a ton of work in America, so usually I mix those terms up. I'm going to add a new document to this area right now. Just to kind of show that it's clean, we're going to take out everything, add this document, and then we're going to put in that sensitive information and watch 365 actually tag that information. So clear this one out. Load this into the system. If this doc was shareable, we can actually go in here and share this document out. Right now it's inheriting the mutable access here of lock, so we're just going to cheat and unlock that for the demo. So if it is locked, you can't change it. You can only view it. It almost puts you in a track changes mode if you've seen that before. It's quite interesting, also quite frustrating when you're trying to configure a few things. We're going to open this document up in the browser. Let the table load up. And what we're looking for this to do is go through and see that this document contains PII information. So it's inheriting that from the previous copy. Now, what it will do is it will recognize the pattern of the social insurance number and start to tag that and lock down that document. And you'll see it get flagged as PII. We can optionally go through and change that information as well. And what we'll also get is emails coming in as we're logged in as this user saying, you know, dear user, you're not supposed to be doing this stuff with this information. And if you did have this document shared, it's now going to be unshared or restricted. So you get these kind of emails open. So to Adams who we're logged in as, this is a policy by the organization. We've detected issues in terms of data loss. So if this item was shared, it's now going to be restricted from that side of things. So there is communication that goes out to the users as well. So I'm running up against the clock pretty hard here. I got about 2 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. So I'll jump over the hold side of thing in the Compliance Center as well, and we'll go through the advanced side of holds. So the advanced e-discovery is where you want to be. There's the core side. It's for different licensing. If you really want to do legal holds, discovery, and e-discovery in 365, you're going to want the advanced side of things. In terms of, pre-cooked things that we've kind of spun up for the presentation today, we have different data sources in here. So the beauty of 365, as I mentioned in the brief slide deck there, was it's a very wide feature set. So for legal holds, you can go across the entire ecosystem, which completely makes sense, but not something a lot of other products can do because they're very siloed to give me all your content in my application, and then I will manage the legal holds of it. They're not federated. This is essentially federated across anything with a Microsoft stamp on it. So inside of these data sources, there's two things that I really like. One is data locations. Very simply, where are we searching? SharePoint sites and Exchange. So shared mailboxes, of course, we can go in Exchange. We want to look at our invoices mailbox or something, or target specific SharePoint sites. Those are considered non-custodial sites. If we want to go into custodial sites or custodians, that is the ability to put a hold on a user. So if we know that Lee has maybe been doing something he shouldn't, on the take for with a vendor or something, and that we can start to look at putting Lee on hold and his relevant content, Exchange, mailboxes, OneDrive, Teams chats, and all that can be done of just within the hold side of things here. So we can pick our custodians. Then we essentially build our search terms that the system and 365 and the Compliance Center will go out and actually follow up and take that information that's already stored in 365 and start to lock that down. So I mentioned earlier, kind of going left to right in configuration of anything. After you have a data source defined, you'll build a collection. Collection is essentially a different word for searching. And as we build our collection out, we start to pick our data sources. So some of our custodians here, Lee, we just set up, and there's a few others like Nestor and Adam. We can choose what to search. We're searching their mailbox, also their OneDrive. You can see the digital loss protection still firing from the data sheet we entered earlier. Non-custodial sites, those are anything like a SharePoint site or anything not related to an individual's access or an individual mailbox that we want to actually search. We can pick additional locations. Maybe we want to choose a specific site as well. Search all our SharePoint sites, and let's look for specific keywords. So this is what I really like. I want to search, if I'm searching in mailboxes and stuff, I want to search for recipients or who sent the message, when it was sent. I want to search for everything from Acme and anything sent between the last month, because we know something's been going on there and we're concerned now. If you want to get into really advanced query editing, KQL is a keyword query language that we can go into as well. Much deeper than we need to at this point, but this is kind of the gist of it. Anything else we want to do in terms of conditions, you essentially build your logic in here. Is there file types? Is there retention labels applied to things? Do we know it's a specific type? Are there recipients if it's mailboxes, senders, subjects, authors? It's all in here. What do we want to do with our collection? So do we just want to have it do a first pass and save it as a draft, or do we actually want to go through and add it to a review set, meaning after I've collected that, it immediately goes out to inside counsel or outside counsel for review? So we'll do a draft for now, and we'll let this collection start, and it'll be added as a draft. After you've collected everything, it goes into that review set. We move our way into communications, and we start putting things on hold. Here's an example of a litigation hold. I'll just kind of show you some contents here. On this NCDS, we have 44 items on hold. It's all across one site, no mailboxes, and it was last run on December 9th. So I'm up against the clock here, so I'll open it up for questions in the chat, or Jared, if you can enable the mics, because I don't just want to continue kind of showing features when we could have a relevant question here.
Jordan, can you hear me okay?
I got you, George, yeah.
Hey, I just want to make a quick comment before we take questions here. This is George Dunn. I started the presentation off. So as you can see, there's a lot here in M365. And what we found through our surveys and talking to users across the United States is that many of them made the mistake of thinking that because they own the platform, that they can just go set it up. And as you can see, there's a lot of different choices, and you really only get one chance to do it right. So the concept of planning, like Cindy talked about, to make sure your schedules, policies, procedures are all up to date, simplified, ready for transition, and then proper setup in the platform is going to be key. And of course, this is just one area in M365. There are many others with workflow and other areas. But so I just want to make that quick comment in terms of planning for this platform.
Thank you, George. And to show I'm not a cheater, the webinar contract did flip over to the automatic retention label of statement of work from the previous one we had on there. So I did forget to show that. So we got 10-ish minutes for questions. Happy to answer any now, whether it's on the records planning side of things or feature functionality. I'll do my best on answering those. So mics are enabled as well for everybody. If you do want to unmute, chime in. I got a question from Richard. Can you touch on pros and cons of implementing centralized location versus in-place records? I'll make an assumption there, Richard. So in-place records, if we're going into what we'll call systems of engagements, the ERP systems, you know, the SAPs, the Oracles of the world that are kind of fairly sticky to get information out of. There are some pros with that in terms of usage from your user side of things, but those larger ERP systems will slow down based on the content, regardless of what they tell you. That's what we see on the implementation side. I kind of find the 365 ecosystem almost a mix now, because if you're in 365, there's a lot of things you're probably not using that you can get extra value from. And I know as records folks and IT folks, budgets are always being sought after by other departments. And the ability to kind of do that almost in place in 365 is a big benefit to everybody that is kind of in that game in the organization. So would I do centralized versus in place? I think in place is definitely on its way out based on what we've seen. So Heidi, you have a question. Does 365 provide a template for a starting point, or do you have to build it from scratch? I'm not aware of a template. We do have some, quick cookbooks kind of on our side as an implementer, and I think Microsoft prefers to kind of leave it there. It's not a daunting task. The one question we ask every client that we get engaged with on a records project, regardless of technology, is your retention schedule approved? And has digital records been considered in it? So we've worked with some governments where it's a very lengthy process. In order to get retention schedules approved, we're talking multiple years. So if it's approved, I don't think it's too hard to get started. By all means, don't go hire one of those accounting firms that says we're going to do an assessment and tell you need an ECM system and you need to do records management. I think you're better off just doing a pilot, but that's my own opinion. I'll answer Rachel's. Will the recording be available? Absolutely. Jared will send that out in the next day or so. So do you have an end-to-end plan for migration and transition to 365? Depends on where you're coming from, but yes, we've worked with organizations transitioning from on M files and open text. A lot are still transitioning from file shares. So there's lots of strategies there we can discuss, and definitely a philosophy that we bring to the table. Darren dropped out, but it looks like, how do we find out what version we're running? So 365 is a little tricky on the desktop application side. They will have a version on the 365 cloud side. It's just auto updated, and your administrator will be given a briefing email almost every month. They have been putting in a lot more records features too. In November, they did a significant upgrade there. Oh, Darren is still there, but he's show offline. Interesting. John, you had a question on, can you file an email as a record and also put it on hold from SharePoint only? So when we file an email, we can use an app called Harmony. It's HORMON.IE if you're looking for it on a URL. So you can file your records there, and then from the, let's see if I can even find that quickly for you. From that side of things, you can put it on hold. So it's, again, can you get the content in the system? Just grab this quickly. It's actually enabled here in Outlook. It's one of the apps you can add in. And then as you have that in here, if we want to grab an email, and let's say we want to file that into the HR area, we can grab our email, simply hit a few buttons up here to save emails, or we can drag and drop from the left to the right. Now, there's a bunch of settings there. Do you want to do a move? Do you want to do a copy? There's some governance rules and philosophies you want to look at in the organization before you just deploy something like this. But the answer to your question is yes. Stephanie, can you generate reports that show the retention labels and policies? Yes, so we can do that with Power BI, which is a Microsoft utility, reporting utility. That's available in E5 anyway, so you get it for let's say free. It's included. So if you're going on the record side of things and you want to generate a report that shows the retention policy labels by site, by usage, by anything like that, it's all possible. So again, the beauty of being kind of within that family of 365. It looks like I timed everybody out on the questions. If there's anything you'd like to see in the future in terms of features and functionalities, we kind of drew this one up, George and myself, after some webinars earlier in 2021. So if there is something you want to see more of, we're willing to put those on and make sure that, you know, we kind of build a bit of a user group here in terms of us showing off new things that we find as we go through different projects and sharing that knowledge around, because it's quite it can be an ever-changing ecosystem. So throw those in the chat, shoot us an email through the invite to Jared, and we hope to see you again soon on a webinar in early 2022.